Hey, welcome to Desktop Hi-Fi. This is going to be a fun video today because we are going to be looking at the ZH3 DAC headphone amplifier from Fosi Audio. Now, as a disclaimer, this was sent to me at no charge for review. However, all opinions of my own, and no one has reviewed this video prior to posting. For more information than what I might provide in this video, links are in the description down below. And if you decide, hey, I want to get one of these for myself, well, Fosi is offering viewers on my channel 15% off, valid through October 25th of this year. So the question is, who is this designed for? Well, in my opinion, if you are already into the Fosi hi-fi world, this is certainly, I think, a no-brainer, especially if you're looking for a great headphone amp. And it's so reasonably priced at like 200 bucks. Okay? I mean, that's a deal in and of itself. Perfect for putting on the desktop. You know, you plug it into your PC and off you go. Plug in some headphones, you're done. You've got everything you need because it's got a very powerful headphone amplifier built into it. As far as DACs go, some people claim that AKM chips have a more musical sound, whatever the heck that means. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that. But maybe a warmer tone. I think that might be the best way to describe it. Maybe just a general timbre of the music might be a little bit warmer, a little bit more sweeter sounding with the AKM chip. That's not always been my experience, but nonetheless, that's okay. It's up to the buyer what you prefer. But it's ideal, I think, for that kind of scenario. Maybe you're a gamer, you've got a console, you can use it with the console. There's so many use cases for it. Whether it's on your desktop, maybe put in an existing rig, maybe you want to have somebody, maybe you have a kid in college, something like that. A lot of different scenarios you can use this with. There is a 2-year included warranty, so it's pretty hard to go wrong with this purchase, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about the unboxing experience, because this thing came double boxed, all right? And in the box, you get a user guide, a power cord, a remote, a 3.5 millimeter to 6.35 millimeter adapter, a power supply, and then you get a 12-volt trigger cable. And then you get the ZH3 itself. Okay, so let me share with you my initial impressions. First off, just the feel of the device in my hand, right? It's not super heavy. I don't have the exact weight. But it's not very heavy at all, but it feels substantial, right, in the hand. All metal chassis on there. You got a very nice looking display. It doesn't take up a lot of room. Matter of fact, it's only 6 inches in width and about 6.4 in depth and just under 2 inches tall, right? So it's a perfect match, say, with the ZA3. As far as on the front of it, you got a nice display. I think it's OLED. Right, that shows you the various state of the DAC, what your input, your output, your sample rate is, as well as the volume. But that volume is relative to just using the headphone output. If you have output anything else, then it becomes just a DAC only mode, no preamp function. So the preamp only seems to work if you're listening through headphones. It's kind of a bummer, but that's the way it works. There's an included 6.35 millimeter unbalanced headphone out and then a 4.4 millimeter balanced headphone out. Beautiful display. Then you also get an included remote. And let me just show this to you. Hopefully you can, come on, focus. There we go. You see, it's kind of basic, but it's really great for things like accessing menus, submenus. And of course, you can mute the DAC. You can quickly change filters, which there are 6 of, and we will talk about that in just a minute. This is probably what you'll use 90% of the time. Let's talk about some of the highlights feature-wise of the ZH3. Okay, first off, you get the AKM 4493 SEQ chip. And that can deliver PCM up to 768 kilohertz and 32 bits, and DSD 512. You get some swappable op amps if that's your thing. You get a 12-volt trigger cable, dual power balanced amp. All right? There's bass and treble controls, but remember, and I think this is very important, those only work when you're in the headphone output. All right. 3-level gain. There's 6 filters, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. Fully balanced headphone circuit. And speaking of which, the max power is 2.7 watts into 32 ohms. And that's if you're using the 4.4 millimeter output. On the front, there's a nice OLED display. That shows you the basic information, your sample rate, input, your filters, etc. That's how you get to it. Now, I will tell you, this is a hint. I think that using the remote control to change all those settings is probably the good way to go. But no, you can use the multifunction knob to do all that stuff as well. It's just easier for this old man to use the remote. Anyway, so you got all that, and of course the knob does things like on and off. Your volume, you control your volume, change your output, select menus. There you have it. On the back of the ZH3, that's the business end of this thing, right? Here's what you get. You get XLR balanced outputs. You have an RCA output. You have an RCA input. You have an optical, coax, and USB inputs. There's a trigger input and in and out for the trigger. And of course, power. That's what's on the back. Let's talk about the setup and ease of use. Well, first off, in my setup, I have this as a separate. So I have the ZP3 preamp. Then I have a Fosi ZA3 amplifier, and then the ZH3 acting as the DAC and headphone amp. And I'm using a 12-volt trigger to activate all of them. So my setup was a little bit more technical getting it going. But actually, you couldn't be any simpler, especially if you're just using a standalone unit. You simply plug in the USB cable into it, the power cord, connect your, start playing your music, plug in your headphones, and you're pretty much in business with this thing. So it's not super fiddly. The menus are not horribly complicated at all. All right. As far as the filters, there's 6 different filters. I use the one that's called natural and smooth because it has a very super slow roll off. It just sounds a little bit better. But there's one for extended highs. There is more analytical filters, etc. To me, I just thought the smooth and natural filters sounded the best. But there's 6 of them to play with. Do it to your heart's content. All right, let's talk about my listening experience to the ZH3. What gear did I use? Okay, so I'm using an iPad Pro. I'm using USB Type-C out, going into the ZH3 USB in. Then out of the ZH3, I'm going into the ZP3 preamp, and out of there, ZA3, out of the ZA3, it goes into the Fosi SP601 bookshelf speakers, right? And that's kind of how I've got that set up. Now, I listen to a lot of different music. My gosh, I've been listening to it for a week solid. And I got to tell you, I think that this sounds best with like vocal jazz, classic rock. I didn't try it with classical. I'm just not a classical music kind of guy, and electronica as well. And it never failed to impress me just how spacious it sounds. Credit due where it's due, okay? I think the SP601 speakers really added some nice dimensionality to the music, to the sound stage, and the imaging. But for my music selection, I have multiple test tracks. But one of my favorite one of my favorite albums, right, is from a singer by the name of Nicole Zeratis. Now, she is a vocal jazz artist, and she released an album, I think it was in January this year, called Siren Songs. You talk about a fantastic sounding album, all right? We're talking, it's breathy, it's got great vocal detail. The melodies are amazing in this album. It's a very impactful, but yet relaxing album, right? And by listening to this, you could feel the dynamics of the ZH3. You could really feel it doing its job in conjunction with the ZA3 amp controlling things like the bass. The damping on the bass, for example, was well controlled. There was no muddiness in the bass, for example. And the mids. That album, by the way, is a great test for mid-range because her voice has got so much dynamic range to it. It's amazing how it sounds. Mids, let's just put it this way. I think they're a bit forward and maybe a little bit more warm, but yeah. I hate to use these terms, but I don't know how else to describe it. I just felt it was more rich and very, very lush sounding. And the treble, vibrant, not shrill, not fatiguing, not tiring whatsoever. So in this rig with that ZH3, sounded great. In the headphone mode, I found the same thing. The mids were warm, a little bit forward, bass was tight, controlled. Yeah, no muddiness, no sloppiness whatsoever. As far as imaging and soundstage goes with the headphones, and I used the Fosi i5 headphones, by the way. I got to tell you, what a wonderful match. what a wonderful pairing of equipment. It really sounded that good. I suppose the next thing is going to be on your mind is maybe what did I compare this with? Well, I think in fairness, you got to compare it with the ZD3, which I happen to have. But let's talk about that. First off, the ZD3 and the ZH3 both use two different DAC chips altogether. The H3, I'm just going to call it the H3 for right now, uses the AKM chipset, whereas the ZD3, well, that uses the Sabre ESS 9039 Q2M chip. But remember, the important thing about this, the sound doesn't really come from the DAC chips. It's done by how it's implemented, the analog outputs. That's what affects the sound. Now, the ZD3, I think, is a bit more detailed. Not much, right? Okay. Maybe some people use that word analytical, but it just felt maybe a little bit more detailed, but not a whole lot more. The ZH3 is a little bit less bright, a little bit more warmer in the mid-range. The ZH3 is really perfect device for an all-in-one type of desktop listening. The ZD3, however, offers more features, right? You get HDMI, you get Bluetooth, you get better SINAD. However, some people claim the ZH3 is more musical. So that's the trade-off, right? And that's something you got to decide. I think the ZD3 sells for $179 as of today, and the ZH3 is like $199. But both, I don't think you can go wrong with either decision. But if you definitely want that headphone output, well, then get that ZH3. So I'm going to do a summary with some pros and cons. First, pro, it seems very well made. Pro, great implementation of the DAC chip with the op amps. A pro, it's the perfect size for the desktop. Another pro, it's got a powerful headphone amp. Really sounds fantastic. Pro, you got a balanced design. Cons, preamp mode only works in headphone output mode only. Con, it lacks Bluetooth, and con, it does not have an HDMI input. So here's the bottom line. I think it's a well-made, warm, and pleasant-sounding DAC and headphone amplifier with an excellent AKM chip. The headphone amp, up to 2.7 watts, could easily drive some of the most demanding headphones on the market. I see this as a high-value product from Fosi. So that's it. That's my review of the ZH3. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next